Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti interview. I'm Joe Kornik, Director of Brand Publishing and Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, our new quarterly content initiative where we put megatrends under the microscope and look far into the future to examine the strategic implications of big topics that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. In this, our first topic, the future of cities, we're exploring the evolution urban areas are undergoing post-COVID and how those changes will alter cities over the next decade and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Kathie Topel, a director in Protiviti's Business Performance Improvement Practice, and Charles Drayton, the Chief Technical Architect and Healthcare and Life Sciences Lead at the Microsoft Technology Center in Chicago, where he helps customers transform the way they engage their patients, employees, and partners. Kathie's going to be doing the interviewing today, so I'm going to turn it over to her to begin. Kathie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Joe, and welcome, Charles. I'm so glad that you could join us here today. I wanted to start off by saying if you could tell us a little bit about the Microsoft Technology Center and what your actual role is there.
Yeah, at the Microsoft Technology Center, I am the Chief Technical Architect in the Chicago office. I'm also the Worldwide Healthcare Experience Lead for all of the MTCs. So what the MTC is, as a Microsoft Technology Center, think of it as a people, place, and process. So when it comes to people, we have an entire team of technical architects who cover the entire breadth of Microsoft technology. When it comes to places, there are places like the MTCs, and we have about 40 of them, or more than 40 of them worldwide. And in each place, we have a number of replica facilities. In Chicago, for example, we have a replica healthcare space that looks just like a hospital, and that is designed to showcase not just the future of technology, but some of the technology innovations that we're doing today that customers can take advantage of. And when it comes to process, we can help organizations with a wide variety of subjects. We manage hackathons, we can do architecture design sessions, we can do strategy briefings, we can give you demonstrations of brand new technology or existing technology. So there's quite a bit that we do at the MTCs.
Charles, when you hear the topic, Future of Cities in 2030 and beyond, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I think there are probably two things that come to mind to me. The first is sustainability, and the second is connectedness. So sustainability, I think anyone who's been following the news, you understand that one of the big challenges of our time is sustainability, green energy, the environmental crisis that we have right now. I think we've taken our eye off the ball a little bit with what's happening with the pandemic, but I think very soon it's coming back to the forefront. So in 2030, I think there's going to be the end result of a significant push towards building the future city in a way that can be energy efficient, that can be self-sustaining, things that can be green in nature, that not only are designed to be zero emissions, but to be negative emissions. And it's actually one of the things that we've committed to doing at Microsoft with our Microsoft campus and in many of the offices that we own. The second thing is connectedness. So I think increasingly you're starting to see the end of the office as we know it. And in place of that, we're going to see more people who are permanently working from home. So the question then becomes, how is it that you can have the same experience at home that you would in the office? We've already seen a trend towards that the past several years. And I think by 2030, that's going to be further accelerated to the point where, vast majority of people are most likely going to be primarily working out of their home. So I think having a connected hybrid virtual sort of space is going to be a major trend that you're going to see by 2030.
We all know that the pandemic has impacted our thoughts of the future. What pandemic outcomes do you believe have altered the current view of the future of cities and beyond versus, let's say, a pre-pandemic view?
Yeah, so I hinted at this with my previous answer a little bit, and I'm not going to say that the office concept is fatally wounded. I think the office is never going to go away, but I think there's going to be a significant shift in how people work. You're going to see more of a shift towards a hybrid workplace where you have some people who are working in the office and some people who are working from home. That's definitely going to be something that has proven to be successful during the pandemic when people were forced to do it, and I think it's here to stay. The other thing you're going to see is As a result of that, you're going to see a fundamental shift in urbanization. So I think the trend, it's funny how this works, where there's always this migration path that goes from cities to suburbs, suburbs to cities, cities to suburbs, and it seems to vary from generation to generation. And I think what we were seeing up until the pandemic was a move away from the suburbs back to the cities. So you started seeing these revitalizations of urban areas and downtown areas. And now I think you're starting to see the reverse of that again. The pandemic, I think, has forced people or compelled people to start thinking, maybe I need more space. Like, if I'm going to be stuck with you and 900 square feet all day, every day, maybe we get a bigger bedroom, right? So I think we're starting to see a move now towards more suburban areas, more rural areas. You're seeing people now who have vacation homes who just think my lake house might not be a bad place to live permanently. And I think you're going to see something of a permanent, or at least for this generation, shift towards that. But I think with that is going to come more demands for better infrastructure to support high-speed internet in some of these places, to support more services in some of these places, because increasingly you're going to find that it becomes a permanent location for a lot of people to do their business out of. And then, finally, it's going to quicken the development in general of rural areas. I think with some of the demographic shifts that are taking place, where you see, millennials and Generation Z people now moving out of places like San Francisco and moving more to rural areas, you're going to see a quickening of the development of those areas than I think they had originally had planned. Because of the fact that they're going to bring their job demands with them, and there's going to be a shift in labor force and labor demands that match that as well.
I know infrastructure has been in the news a lot lately. Multiple bills are being debated around making investments in infrastructure and modernizing large parts of our country. What do you see as the relationship between the future of infrastructure and the impact it will have on cities of the future?
Yeah, I think there are going to be kind of three things that we're looking at. The first one is going to be, as I mentioned before, sustainability and connectedness. So I talked a bit about that initially, but I think those are going to be key pillars of infrastructure. I think any investment in infrastructure, regardless of what happens with the bill currently being debated right now, it's all going to come back to how is it that we're able to narrow the gap between urban areas and rural areas. I think for a long time, the development in technology and development in the infrastructure in these urban areas has caused the development of that to outstrip the development of rural areas. And I think in many respects, they've been left behind. But I think if this infrastructure thing works out, you're going to see a lot of investment in rural areas to really bring them more in line with what urban areas develop, or with what urban areas have to offer now. So that's going to be appealing to younger generations who I think are already starting to move to areas like that. And it's also going to, I think, narrow everything from the education gap to the development gap. And this is something that is particularly powerful for minority communities or for poor communities who typically are overrepresented in rural areas. I think it's going to create more opportunities for them. And I think it's going to create a somewhat more equitable future if this is pulled off the way I think everyone is hoping for it to be. I think part of the end result of that is going to be things like the dispersing of the workforce. So once you have infrastructure available, so that you have high-speed internet in both urban areas and suburban areas and rural areas, I think it's now going to make for safer and more comfortable environment for generations of knowledge workers. And you'll find that knowledge workers are increasingly outstripping, a lot of the former blue-collar workers as those jobs start to shrink. And you're going to see that replaced with more of a knowledge-based workforce. And the third, I think, is going to be finally starting to look at the internet as a commoditized utility. I think for a long time we saw that as a luxury. And because we saw it as a luxury, it was difficult to think of it as something that was a driving force behind things like income inequality or performance differences within different communities. Like, why is it certain neighborhoods tend to have students who perform better than others? And I think we're starting to see research now that says, the internet as a universal human right is something that, when commoditized, can really go a long way towards leveling the playing field. So I think a lot of the investments in infrastructure are really designed to help start closing some of these income and performance gaps that you see in a lot of these areas.
Charles, you shared at the beginning with us that the healthcare exhibit at the MTC is an amazing view into what can be possible. What influence will the possibilities for healthcare organizations have on the future of our cities?
Yeah, I think we've already started seeing this. It's funny. I've been in healthcare for a long time, and for many years we had telehealth technology that we would try and sell to hospitals, and they would say, "No, it's not really necessary. We don't see ourselves as people who would ever really see patients outside the hospital or outside of the doctor's office." And obviously, that all changed with the pandemic. And similar to how people who had previously never really done online shopping, who are sort of resistant to it, suddenly discovers the joys of Amazon.com for the first time, and they never go back because they realize how easy it is. So like my mother. Like my mother was the sort of person who would always, go to the store no matter what. I'd say Amazon Prime. She's like, but you can't look at your groceries. Like, why would you do something like that? And then she realized she had no choice. She realized how convenient it is, and now that she can go back to the store anytime she wants, she's not doing it. And I think it's a very similar thing now where hospitals are beginning to realize that actually virtual care isn't so bad. And actually, there are great opportunities to create a continuum of care that takes place. So, not only can we care for the patient when the patient is within our four walls, but we can continue the dialogue and we can continue the monitoring of the patient even after the patient is discharged or even after the patient leaves the doctor's office. Because many things that happen with a patient that would lead to complications, that would lead to readmission, takes place after their discharge. Did they refill their prescription? Did they take their medication? Are they following through on the post-discharge instructions? And you had no real way of verifying that traditionally. But now with virtual care and ability to combine that with things like continuous vitals monitoring and having that sort of connected ecosystem of health makes it much easier to start getting a lot of these early signals from patients. So is a patient taking 45 days to refill a 30-day prescription? If so, I want to know about that so I can do an outreach with them. If we have rehab, some sort of physical rehab for the patient, and they have some sort of connected watch, are they taking the requisite number of steps? If they're not, I want to know about that because it may mean that they're not really following through on the post-discharge instructions. Are they weighing themselves regularly because they have to get their weight down to a certain level in order to qualify for a specific type of surgery? And are they on track to do that? A lot of these things take place at home. And increasingly, hospitals and healthcare organizations are realizing that and are starting to make more investments into it. So going back to this idea of future cities, when we start looking at the commoditization of the internet as a whole, and now making internet available at little or no charge in all kinds of rural communities, now when you look at these underrepresented communities in terms of the number of hospitals that are there or the number of or a number of stores that are there that sell fresh foods, we're now able to extend our ability to care even out to them. And I think that's another way of beginning to close the gap that has historically existed between vulnerable communities that are often rural communities or even urban communities that aren't close to hospitals or to fresh food sources, and how do we bring that care to them to create a more equitable environment for wellness overall?
With the virtualization of collaboration, it's changed the way we socialize, work, and live our lives. The ability to collaborate and share from anywhere allows each of us to make different choices now. How will these different choices impact real estate? And what role might technology play in new trends to emerge for cities?
So, I'm glad you. It's a very timely question you asked. So, I've been looking for some income property for a while. I'm looking to sort of diversify a little bit, and so I've been looking for these sort of multi-unit places, and I've been consistently outbid anywhere in the South. Like, I cannot buy a home in Dallas. I cannot buy a home anywhere in Georgia. Every time I try, I'm sort of outbid by these all cash offers that are like 10% over asking. Um, and I say that to say, when from a real estate standpoint, people understand the fact there are some significant demographic shifts that are going on in terms of where people are moving and how people are living. And I think some of the things that you're seeing now is being manifested in this kind of rush for purchasing real estate in in warmer climates or in more suburban areas and rural areas. And I'm definitely feeling the results of that. And I think it's going to lead to more demand for better infrastructure, similar to some of the things I've been talking about throughout our conversation here. The demand for fast, high speed internet everywhere. So not just in downtown Chicago do we get like gig internet, but how do we get it everywhere, right? And where does it show up everywhere? Because you're going to see more of these virtual calls. So I think you're going to see increased support and demand for investment in infrastructure as we start seeing, from a real estate standpoint, more and more families moving to areas where traditionally they haven't been. So I think those are some of the things from a residential standpoint that you're going to see as a change or a shift when it comes to real estate. From a commercial standpoint, I think one of the things that you're going to see is a I'm going to call it an urbanization of the suburbs. So as people start moving out into rural areas more and they start moving out to suburban areas more, you're going to see a move away from urban areas of commercial offerings and bringing them more into suburban and rural areas. So, as Generation Zers and Generation Y people tend to go, you're going to see more restaurants and shops open up around them. So you're going to see a decrease in demand for commercial real estate, perhaps in urban areas, but I think you're going to see an increase in demand for commercial real estate in some of these suburban areas as you start providing some of the comforts of the urban environment that they moved from into suburban environments. So you're going to start seeing, perhaps, this is all a guess that I have, the shrinking of major cities and instead the growth of these little mini metropolises in some of the satellite areas. And I think that's where a lot of commercial real estate opportunity is going to be. I think you're also going to see a fundamental shift in retail, as you've been seeing already, and this has just sort of exacerbated things a little bit more, but in really interesting ways. So I've worked with a couple of commercial real estate companies, and one of the things that they were sort of excited about with this is this shift away from malls as being places where you go and shop to malls as being centers of recreation, particularly around many of the suburban and rural areas, where it's not simply a place where you have these stores, but it's kind of your work play area. And I think you're going to see a resurgence of that in some of these rural places as organizations start creating these kind of satellite metropolis cities out of what were formerly, fairly barren rural areas.
Charles, if you can leave our viewers with just one thought of the future of cities for 2030 and beyond, what would that be?
So I want to show you a little something here. So I'd like to introduce you to Priya. Priya is a robot, and Priya is something that was initially designed by a company that was then acquired by Stanley Black and Decker. And what Priya does is she is a pill dispensing robot. And this pill dispensing robot can do everything from have virtual meetings with a physician to dispensing pills to monitoring your vitals. So if there is a spike in something, if you have AFib, she's able to give you an early intervention and say, hey, this might be something that is potentially a medical emergency. I think Priya and things like Priya are going to be increasingly key components of the future. And not just from a healthcare standpoint, but from, I did something recently that talked about this idea of senior isolation. The fact that senior homes couldn't get visitors for a full year. I mean, that's led to a mental health crisis within senior homes. And one of the ways that we talked about addressing that was through senior gaming. So there are gaming leagues that have formed in places like Pennsylvania that create this virtual community among seniors where they can be connected to each other and to their loved ones and to everyone else, even if they can't physically be there. So increasingly, you're going to see this idea of community, emoji, and technology starting to be merged in a way where even if we are remote, we're going to be closer together than ever. I think those are really good examples of that. So my thinking is, in the future, you're going to see a stronger sense of community, and I think you're going to see, but you're also going to see, more virtualization. So you're going to see the combination of the two of them in very unexpected ways. Or since it's 2030, I can be entirely wrong about all of it because technology moves that fast.
Thanks so much, Charles, for your insights here today and your participation. We truly appreciate it. And you brought us so many ideas for the future, and we're very, very excited for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathie, and thanks, Charles. Charles, a real rock star, brings his own visual aids with him, some real estate advice, and a little couple jokes thrown in there for good measure. So we always appreciate that levity, Charles. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.